Okay, viewers, in this new session, we're going to be focusing on same economics, but strictly calculation and diagrams, because we want to have students, find it easy to solve the major problems that we assume students will likely have when they get into the exam hall. And the reason is this: the questions that don't involve calculation and diagrams, we have cases where students can find search engines like Google and Chrome, put the questions there, and find a way to get something that they can pick as their answers. But for calculation and diagrams, that might not be easy. So you need somebody to actually put them down and make them clear. Thank you. Okay, viewers, for questions in economics that involve calculation and diagrams, we're going to start with a question from one of the question type in 2020. That's for JAM, which is also known as UTME. Question number 4, according to our past question, which can be different with any other one if it's not the same product that you are referring to. Now, this question says, in the production process, total output is at maximum when option A, average product is less than 0, marginal product is greater than 0, marginal product is equal to 0, average product is equal to 0. Now, the first thing you need to note, if you must have a better understanding of this question, is the fact that there's a diagram for production theory. And then total output also means total product. And then we have this, we have average product, and then we have marginal product. Marginal product. Take note when this is 0. That's what the examiner wants. Let's compare the options. Option A, we have average product is less than 0. At this point, average product is greater than 0. So that cannot be our answer. The second one says marginal product is greater than 0. This is marginal product. It's not greater than 0 because the numbers above 0 don't tally with the point of interaction. So we cannot say it is greater than 0. It's equal to 0, not greater than 0. That makes option C our correct answer. At the point when total output is a maximum, marginal product is equal to 0. So looking at diagram, option C is our best answer. D cannot be our answer because average product is not equal to 0. This is average product, rather equal to 3 from the figures I've used. So makes C our best answer. Okay. The next question we are considering here is a question from the same 2020 UTME, which is also known as JAM, but this time we're going with question number 5. Question number 5 is a question from the theory of population. And the question says, from the diagram, from the shaded area of the diagram above, an appropriate population policy will be to do what? Looking at that diagram, you can see that what we have here is underpopulation, and then this region is for overpopulation. So for underpopulation, if underpopulation exists, the best policy that the government will introduce is a policy that will help the population grow. And looking at the population control measures, we have 4 of them listed here in the option. Which one do you think would help this population which needs to grow? The first one says discourage immigration. To discourage immigration means reduce the free, process of allowing people get into a country. So it's just the mobility of people into a country. When we discourage that, it means we're going to introduce a lot of restrictions. If it has to do with traveling documents, we make the process difficult. And that reduces the number of people coming into a country, for example. That's not going to help the country population grow. It's going to help it reduce because they need more, and now they're putting a lot of restrictions. So this cannot be our answer. Encourage the use of contraceptive. Now, this is one of the positive check on population because this is going to involve death, killing of unborn children. Now, when you have to kill the unborn children, when you encourage the use of contraceptive, means before they are born, they are already dead in the womb. That's going to reduce population. That's not going to increase population, and that won't work in this diagram. So this is also wrong. Discourage polygamy. Polygamy is the privilege to have more than one wife by a man. Now, if we discourage that, it means that we will not have too many children coming in from a man, because to be one man, one wife. And that's going to reduce population or probably discourage increase in population. It will help this diagram. This also makes option C wrong. Encourage early marriage. It means before people even get, to the regular age, this government can allow them to get married. If the regular age of getting married, or average age is like 25, the country who has this kind of population can decide to reduce the time of marriage to like 20, and then encourage people, support people to get married that early. When that happens in this country, it's going to help them have more kids as early as possible, and that's going to increase the population of the country. That makes option D our correct answer. And any child in the exam hall who sees this kind of question, please just go straight to option D, because that's going to give us a perfect answer. Now, the next question we have decided to consider is a question from price legislation. Now, price legislation has a diagram that will reveal whether we have minimum price or maximum price legislation. So as we look at this diagram, you can see there's a new price above. The price 1 is the equilibrium price, which is a price that is demanded or fixed by what? The forces of demand and supply. And then the government comes in to say, let's have a price legislation. When the government fixes the price above the equilibrium price, it is to protect either the consumer or the producer. But in this case, you can see that a high price will always protect the producers. Now, going down to the question, it says in the diagram above, the price P2 in price control situation is referred to as. One of the confusion students will have is thinking that when the price is legislated above the equilibrium price, when government comes in to peg the price or fix it above the equilibrium price, because it's above doesn't make it maximum price. It is not maximum price because this price above is the lowest amount that suppliers are expected to take for goods and services sold. So if this is the lowest amount they're expected to take, under law, it is minimum price legislation. It makes your correct answer option A, minimum price, because it is the lowest amount that a producer or supplier is expected to take for goods and services sold. Anything below this is going to lead to black marketing, because government has said sell above equilibrium price so that you can be protected or you can make more money. The opposite of this is maximum price legislation, and that's what we have at option B. It cannot be our answer because maximum price legislation is always below the equilibrium price. And when it goes below the equilibrium price, it is maximum price because it is the highest amount under law that consumers are expected to pay for goods and services purchased. It's a benchmark. If they buy above that, then they have involved themselves in what? Black marketing. So because government wants to protect them, it will set the price below the equilibrium price and tell them that's the maximum you should pay. And that's the only way to be favorable to them. But in this case, it is to protect the suppliers. It has to be above, and that's the lowest amount, and that makes it minimum price. Markup price don't come into this topic. Markdown price don't even have any business here. So this makes option A the correct answer. So this time we're taking another question, looking related or close to the one we had at number 23, but this time same year, same UTME, JAM, and then we have question 30 this time. Question 30 is also a question from price legislation. And then we have FG. The examiner said, what does it indicate? The question says, in the graph above, FG indicates what? Still the same kind of diagram we had previously, but if you're looking at FG, you can create something like this to show that supply is greater than demand. This is a spot for supply, and this is a spot for demand. So this is like the gap, the excess. This excess is not on the demand side, it's on the supply side. If it's on the supply side, then our correct answer is excess supply. Excess supply, that line, if we trace it to the price axis, it will give us another price which represents minimum price legislation. So minimum price legislation is always to protect suppliers. And when they discover that government have given them a higher price to sell at, they take more commodity to the market, while those who are to buy withdraw from the market. So the price of increasing supply and decreasing demand gives us excess supply. Option A is not correct because we do not have excess demand. Below this equilibrium price, which is also known as maximum price legislation, we would have had excess demand. Option A would have been correct if this price was fixed below. Demand will be higher than supply. But since that's not the case, option A cannot be correct. Option C, equilibrium price. Equilibrium price, this is equilibrium point. This is our equilibrium price, and this is equilibrium quantity. But since this doesn't have business to do with this and this, then C and D cannot be our answer because this is what they represent. So for any student who happens to find this diagram in the exam hall, you don't need to waste your time. You go straight, the answer is excess supply, and that's option B. Now we have an interesting topic. And this topic is interesting because it's a topic that we can generate shortcuts from when we want to find answers to this kind of question. It will help us beat time or save time here and then, add it up to use it for questions that we cannot produce or generate shortcuts from. Now this is a question from statistics, and it is same JAM 2020, and then question 18 this time. A question from pie chart, specifically under the topic called statistics, can best be approached if we remember that it deals with three possible components: degrees, percentages, and quantities. Now quantities can be in form of currency or other kind of value apart from degree and percentages. Now the strategy that any student can apply to save time, which is the shortcut, is to equate the total part and the partial part of these two quantities represented in the question. At any point, it's just two that you find represented. In this question, I can see that it is percentage and degree that examiner wants me to combine. Percentage and degree. That means I'm going to consider total percentage against partial percentage, total degree against partial degree. You recall in that case that, please, TD means total degree. My total degree is equal to my partial degree, while my total percentage is equal to my partial percentage. If total degree is equal to 360, which is always unknown, partial degree we do not know, that's what we're looking for, and total percentage is equal to 100%, which is known. We have partial percentage, which is always a reference point to the part of the pie chart mentioned in the question. They said percentage for children, 40%. We move. You cross multiply and make the unknown your subject of formula, and then your answer will show. If I am to cross multiply, this is what I'm going to have. I'm going to have 360 equal to my partial degree, and then 100 is equal to 40. Obeying this instruction, this is what I'm going to have. This goes up and this goes up. But we don't need to take this up because we're dividing. So we can have 360 times 40, that's equal to 100. And that gives us a partial degree. If this takes this takes this, you have 36 against 4. What's your 4 times 6? It's still 24. What's your 4 times 3? 12. Your 12 plus 2 gives you 14. And that's your partial degree that you're looking for, is 144 degree. And that makes option A your correct option. Within 10 seconds, you can get this done and move on. Now, I want students watching this to give me all the concentration, because this question is not just tricky, it's technical. It's technical because if you do not understand elasticity of price elasticity of demand, you will not get this question correctly, even if you come across it 10 times. Now, the examiner says, this is a question from St. Jam 2020, question number 20. Question number 20, we have, when demand is elastic, it means that consumers will do what? Before we take our options, take note. Elastic can be relatively elastic or fairly elastic. when the examiner says elastic, when the examiner is silent about elastic, what it actually means is relatively elastic or fairly elastic. Now, anything that has to do with elastic means that consumers will react more. When the price is increased, there will be a negative reaction from the consumer because they don't like buying at high prices, so they will run. When the price is reduced, you have more consumers running to buy that product. It's just the law of demand working in this case. Now, let's bring that idea into the options. Option A says react equally to price change. No, this cannot be correct because looking at the diagram, under price elasticity of demand, this can only work if we have a case of unitary. And unitary demand means that as we change price, for example, quantity demanded should change with the same proportion. So we have Q1, Q2. You can see A, B. The gap between this and this, the same, unitary. So this is for this. And that's not what elastic is all about. This is unitary. It cannot work here. That makes option A wrong. They said consumers are not sensitive to price change. No. They will have to be sensitive. If they're not sensitive, then we are saying that what the consumers have is a price elastic demand that is perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic, not sensitive, the same thing. And that's what we have when the diagram for demand looks this way. We have quantity and then price changes without any change in quantity. Yeah, we can say that option B is correct, but that's not the case we have here, because in elastic, consumers will react more. What we have here, option C, will stop buying when price increases. Okay, that can be true. But before we judge that, I would like us to look at option D and confirm that option D can't be our answer. Because from what I can see, that's the option that's going to throw a lot of people off balance. Option D says react less proportionately to the price. Now this means that the consumers are going to run away from buying the commodity, but not as much as expected, which is not true. For elastic, they will run in a large number. And this is a diagram that shows that they will run in a large number. Now this is option A, this is for option B, and this is for perfectly inelastic. Option C is for elastic or perfectly elastic. But let's judge option D first before we come to this. Option D is clear. If they have to react less proportionately to the price, then we are talking about relatively or fairly inelastic demand. Relatively or fairly inelastic demand has this nature. And it means that when price changes, P1 for example, Q1, look at the gap. This is Q2 and this is P2. The gap between price and quantity. They are telling us that if this happens, is it possible for consumers to react less proportionally to price? This is what the diagram, this explains this diagram. If they react less proportionately to price, considering the gap, does that show
elastic. No, this is relatively inelastic. This is relatively inelastic. So it is something related to this. This is an extension of this. So it's still inelastic, and we're dealing with elastic. So option D is wrong because of this diagram. Option C is our best answer because option C is actually talking about perfectly elastic. But we can consider it to be elastic because it is still elastic. That's the only option that speaks about elastic. Elastic, where the examiner is silent, I told you, is relatively elastic. So we either have the diagram perfectly elastic or we go with relatively elastic. From the question, this is what they want us to put up. So if they are putting up this, you can see that price 1, quantity 1, price 2, quantity 2. If we have this gap against this reaction from consumers, you can see that consumers will react more proportionately to price, and that means D cannot be your answer. If this question interprets this diagram, then D cannot be our answer because D is the opposite of this, which is this. So taking this, which is relatively elastic, relatively or fairly elastic, from this 4 diagram, if I put up the options in diagram, this is the only option that explains elastic. That makes this wrong. Unitary, elastic. It also makes perfectly inelastic wrong. It also makes relatively inelastic wrong. And that means this is the only correct or possible correct answer. Take note. For students who don't really understand elasticity of demand, this might just be a trap in your question this year.
Okay, viewers, we're considering a question from National Income Accounting. Now, this question is actually specifically from a sub-unit of that topic in National Income called Equilibrium Level of Income. And under equilibrium level of income, there is another subtopic known as multiplier. Now, multiplier is simply the rate of change in national income with respect to changes in other components of national income like consumption, investment, government expenditure, exports, and imports. And multiplier can be expressed with 2 formulas. One is with the rate of change, where we have multiplier K, for example, is equal to, let's use M for clarity, is equal to change in income over change in consumption. Or multiplier can also be 1 over 1 minus MPC, or multiplier is also equal to 1 over MPS. Having a good knowledge of national income accounting, let's look at what this question wants us to do. It said, given that Y is equal to C plus I and C is equal to BY, where B is equal to 0.8, what is the multiplier? Take note, my B here is marginal propensity to consume, where the equation gives you C plus I. So this is a 2-sector model, consumption plus investment. Under consumption, B is a part of the consumption formula, which is A plus BY. A plus BY, the B here represents 0.8, which is marginal propensity to consume. Now, marginal propensity to consume is the only component that I need for multiplier to fly as a question in this aspect. If I reproduce this formula, picking this because the examiner gave us MPC. So this is the formula that we can use. This formula says multiplier is calculated as 1 over 1 minus MPC. But MPC from what we have here is equal to B, and that's equal to 8. Take note. Then my multiplier will become 1 over 1 minus 0.8, which gives me 1 over 0.2, and that gives me 10 over 2. Finally, it gives me 5. It means that the rate at which this is going to react to the national income is in 5 places. What do we mean here? Anyway, before we even get into that, this makes option D our correct answer. Let me throw a little light or more light on what this multiplier means. If you have 5 as a multiplier, it means that when we have changes in national income components, the effect of that change on our national income itself will be in 5 folds. For example, you have changes in form of a 10 million naira change. Against this kind of multiplier, it will affect the national income by 50 million. That's 10 times 5. And that's something we have to talk about when we take national income probably as a whole topic. But for this kind of question, where the MPC is 0.8, y is equal to c plus I, the formula to adopt is 1 over 1 minus MPC. Following that guideline, your answer eventually will give you 5. And anytime, any day, that's the way it's going to work, and it will always be correct. Okay, viewers, this brings us to the end of one part of calculation and diagram questions, as we mentioned earlier. We hope that you stay with us as we proceed. And before then, don't forget to click on the like button, subscribe, turn on your notification, and don't forget to leave a comment. It's still CS Academy. We'll be right back. Thank you.